But overall, the enlargement project came up with a concept of the political that was eviscerated to a large extent of all these things that, if not taken care of properly, might lead into what the Greeks call the tumult, meaning civil war. The biggest fear in Western philosophy, political philosophy, is the fear of civil war. When you read from the Greeks up to the present, and what liberal democracies have done since their inception, especially from mid-19th century on, or even earlier on, has been to externalize into the colonies and other spaces of confinement the risk of civil war these societies were exposed to in case they let passions, feelings, emotions invade the political sphere. That's the nocturnal history of democracy, if you want, of liberal democracy. So, history of externalization of the kind of violence without reserve you wouldn't apply internally, or you would apply internally only if at the beginning, at the origins, you institute an ontological difference between you and the ones who have to be subject to that kind of violence, which was the case in the USA, for instance, where slavery, the plantation, became precisely that space of externalization of violence that threatens to create a condition of civil war, and at the end of the plantation, the entry into prison, where you have people going from the plantation to the prison, and now, of course, every single week, 2 weeks, you kill a black man. You execute a black man. It does an extrajudicial execution, mirroring to some extent what is happening in Afghanistan and all that with terrorists, where you kill them with a drone. But as we have seen in, I think it was Dallas or latest thing, the last one to be executed was executed not by the police, but by an instrument of war, a weapon of war. The militarization of policy and the economy that comes with it, economy of fines in particular, where municipalities have to balance their budgets, but in order to do that, they have to go and find all those blacks they can find when they don't subject them to the death penalty. So that is the nocturnal history of democracy. We can talk a lot more about viscerality, its intensity, its analytic utility, but we don't have much time for that. Let me go to the end by highlighting two things. So we hear that the idea that the subaltern should inflict violence, a bigger amount of violence to the structures that oppress him or her, we hear many people referring to Fanon to justify that. So Fanon is back. Disappeared for some time, is back. But we have to look into this. What Fanon? Who is this Fanon who is back? It's a unidimensional Fanon, if you want to be generous. Unidimensional because, of course, Fanon was many different. He was not singular. There are many different Fanons. So it's a unidimensional Fanon. It's a Fanon that is manufactured through something I call misreading, where business today is not to read. Nobody's in, not nobody, but some. David Atwell is here, and I'm sure that he's still committed to some kind of serious reading. Max Anderson is all of you. But Stephen, many other friends. But what I'm trying to suggest is that the age of reading, or certain kind of reading, might be behind us. That it might not really be about surface reading and the rest. It might be something probably a bit more, it may be something more ominous. When misreading is not an accident. I'm not interested in reading properly. I'm interested in misreading. Because misreading allows me to effectuate a whole set of moves I wouldn't be able to make if I were to do either slow or deep reading. So misreading as the new politics, as a cog in the new politics of viscerality, of which we can say more, had to, for a short of time, cut it short. So, misreading and a certain kind of romance of violence, I think we have to address. It's a discussion I have had with, it has landed me into trouble, but look, at some point you have to stand up and say what you think. And embrace the consequences of what you see. I have read Fanon, and a lot of what passes for Fanon today is simply not true. It's not true, and here I want to be a bit more positive. Especially in relation to the question of violence. Violence in Fanon has many different qualities. What concept is it, violence in Fanon? First of all, it is a narrative concept. It's a concept that allows him to tell the stories, multiple stories, some of them really contradictory, of those people he has had to deal with in his clinical practice. So it's a clinical narrative concept. It is a clinical concept which he uses to account for the life of his patients. And for those who have read Fanon carefully, his text is suffused, saturated by the voice of his patients. And the trauma they have endured in their attempt to live their lives. And we are in urgent need of a serious study on Fanon's patients. The texts are there, everything is there, we need it. And finally, really finally, violence is a political concept. Itself extremely complex. So the first sort of things we have to keep in mind. Second, Fanon is very aware of the fact that violence is not a single paroxysmal event. It is multiple. It is not simply multiple, it is manufactured. It's not an accident. It is systemic. And his task in his work, in his text, in his praxis, is to track that multiplicity. And its circulatory forms, because violence is something that circulates. His task is to expose the mechanics of its being manufactured. And his task is to account for the ways in which it undergoes a logic of sedimentation. So when you study it properly, this is what appears. Third, Fanon is absolutely clear about the fact that violence generally produces injuries. It produces traces you can track. It produces scars. And it will take a very long time to heal these injuries because it leaves behind it all kinds of vestiges. And it leaves entire environments in a state of non-habitability. The question of habitation. That the biggest drama of violence is to expropriate one from his or her body. The body becomes uninhabitable. You cannot inhabit it, you don't recognize it as yours. It makes you do things you wouldn't do yourself. And it kills the ecological environment, which is necessary for one to practice the kind of life one wants to practice, which is a life of freedom. And then there's the political dimension of violence, which itself is clearly articulated to the possibility of cure. You cannot say anything meaningful about Fanon's theory of violence if simultaneously you don't say something about his theory of cure. So, is it that violence cures? That is the question he's asking. Can it be an instrument of cure? Because the goal is not the repetition of destruction. The goal is to cure. To cure whom? What in South Africa we call the perpetrator and the victim. Because, in fact, both have been mutually destroyed, although on a very asymmetrical set of levels, in the process, in the encounter with violence, whether given or received. So, this question of the politics of violence and the politics of cure are intrinsically related in Fanon's politics. But overall, I'll end it there, overall, he believes that there's always something in the deployment of violence that is uncontrollable. You cannot control it. So we are very far from a theory of romance. There's no romance of violence in Fanon at all. There is an urge to cure, which hasn't been to cure and to care, these two things, which are in his mind preconditions for us to make the planet habitable again. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Achille, for a very thought-provoking presentation, and I'm sure there are lots of questions. So, do you want to take round three? Should we take a round of three?